In December of 1941, only 10 days after the Japanese sneak attack at Pearl Harbor, the people of North Platte, Nebraska gathered around the local depot of the Union Pacific Railroad, waiting for a troop train that they'd heard would be carrying the members of their local National Guard company westward on their way to training and eventual deployment. In the 1940s, before diesel locomotives had been widely adopted by railroad companies in the U.S., the existing steam engines needed to stop every 100 miles or so during the long cross-country trip to take on coal and water, to give the crews a rest, to service the moving parts of the machines. North Platte's depot was one of those stops, and the locals gathered there with gifts of food and cigarettes, letters for the boys to read on their way west, or simply to hug a loved one for a moment on their trip. When the train arrived, it was full of National Guard troops, but Kansans, not Nebraskans. It didn't take long for the gathered North Platte folks to decide to simply gift the food and smokes and affection they'd brought to the servicemen in front of them, whoever they were. In a letter to the editor of the local paper the following day, North Platte resident Ray Wilson suggested creating a volunteer canteen at the depot and continuing to provide the passing troop trains with a similar welcome, with gifts and smiles and encouragement. "We can help this way when we can't help any other way," she concluded. This canteen in North Platte operated from Christmas Day in 1941 to April 1st, 1946, by which time all or most of the surviving servicemen had made it home. During the war, similar canteens sprang up around the country along the various railroad lines that had been pressed into service for troop movements. Everywhere, Americans on the home front came together to offer homegrown kindnesses to our boys heading overseas to fight. North Platte was the longest-running, highest volume, and perhaps best known of the World War II railroad canteens, but far from the only one. If another World War II canteen could be said to approach the renown of the North Platte Canteen, it might be the one in Aberdeen, South Dakota. 400 miles north of North Platte, on the Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul Railroad, the Aberdeen Canteen was better known by a nickname it earned from the sandwiches it served, the Pheasant Canteen. In 2013, a group of former volunteers from the canteen, working together as the WWII Pheasant Canteen team, produced a documentary about the canteen called Pheasant Canteen, A Living Legacy. Though, truth be told, the documentary is as much about the ladies of the Pheasant Canteen team and the work they've done to preserve the story of the canteen as it is about the canteen itself. At first, the canteen in Aberdeen typically served the soldiers ham sandwiches, along with the usual candy and cakes, cigarettes, and coffee. But as the war wore on, and perhaps as rationing took its toll on the available supplies, the farmers of South Dakota began bringing in the game birds that they'd shot in their fields and donated them to the cause. The ring-necked pheasant was South Dakota's state bird, and population estimates at the time put their numbers well into the millions in that state alone. The servicemen who stopped at the station came to like those pheasant sandwiches. First-time visitors who had heard about them would request pheasant in preference to the ham sandwiches. The pheasants on the plains were bountiful and easier to come by than rationed meats like ham. Eventually, large hunts were organized to supply the canteen. And among the things that town in South Dakota has preserved about the Pheasant Canteen is the original recipe for the pheasant sandwich, though scaled down a bit, I'd imagine, from the quantities they were making during the troop train heyday. The recipe calls for cooked, finely chopped pheasant meat with hard-boiled egg, carrot, onion, celery, and sweet pickle relish, mixed together with mayonnaise or salad dressing and seasoned with salt and pepper. According to the recipe, the mixture is spread directly onto sandwich bread without any additional garnish. Now, you'd be forgiven for mistaking this for chicken salad just to look at it, or to taste it for that matter. These birds were factory farmed rather than hunted in the fields of South Dakota, so they might lack some gamey flavor that the pheasants of the 40s might have had. But in general, to no one's surprise, pheasant simply tastes like chicken, only more so. More chicken than chicken, as if Tyrell Corporation had dabbled in replicant livestock. It's a good sandwich. Is it a mind-blowing sandwich? Maybe not, but if I were an 18-year-old GI in 1944, newly graduated from high school and shipped off to war, wrapped up in a uniform and put on an uncomfortable and loud train with hundreds of my fellow recruits as we slowly made our way across the country to an uncertain future, And somewhere, at yet another brief stop in the flat, featureless gray of the American midsection, I stopped off the train for a breath of fresh air, and to my surprise, here was a smiling young volunteer, handing me a cup of coffee and a pheasant sandwich, maybe stopping for a moment to chat with me, or even take a turn and jitterbug with me to the tune of a pre-war hit record spinning on the station turntable. Well, I might think that was the best sandwich I'd ever had in my life. And if I made it back from the war, I might still be telling people about that sandwich 60, 70, 80 years later.